So, Sam, what is your first question?
First question was figuring out where the sequence actually begins. Since I see, according to some of the videos, that the down by a step begins here, so the sequence would start after the six or at the 6.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the 5-7 at the beginning, which I think we're actually prolonging the 5-7.
Okay, I love that word, prolong. Okay, if someone here, let's pick up the score just to compare this opening a little bit with the actual score. When you first open, you get scale degree 5. Okay. When does it become 5-7? In measure 1, 2, 3, or 4?
In 4.
In 4.
That's where the D flat comes in.
Yes, when the D flat comes in at the end of measure 4, then it really becomes the 5-7. So you have E flat and the D natural and the F are really neighbors around the E flat. When you have the D natural, that really is pointing back to the E flat. When in measure 4, we get the D natural, D flat, and that D flat is a 7th. 7th's resolved down by step. That nicely goes to C. That sets up the C at the beginning of the real theme. Okay, so the arrival in measure 5 of an A flat, that's a real A flat. So this is absolutely, that's a real A flat. And then we get the beginning of a sequence somewhere, and it doesn't prolong tonic. You correctly have the half cadence labeled. What's the difference between measures 11 and 12? In other words, I'm asking, could you have put the half cadence as arriving in measure 11 instead of measure 12? So if we want to, for a moment, I'm going to show, here's 7, 8, 9, 10. Here's measure 11. I'll label that in between. And here's measure 12. And here's 13, which is the same as 5. Yeah, that's a tough question. Yeah, what's the difference between the 5-7 in measure 11 and the 5-7 in measure 12? Notice that on my skeleton version, I don't have any of the ornamentation. I just have pure B flat in the right hand, pure B flat. The A natural, C, and F sharp A, C, it's a diminished triad. That's an ornament. The A natural is a lower neighbor to B flat. The C is a lower neighbor to D. The F sharp is a lower neighbor to G. That is a lower neighbor chord. But the E flat, first sounding in the lower register, the downbeat of a measure 11, and then repeated on every beat in 11 and 12. That's your real bass note there. Okay. So do we have any thoughts about does the half cadence arrive in 11 and extend through 12, or is it really in 12? Or does it matter? Any response?
I don't really. I didn't hear that it actually mattered that much to me.
Where do you hear the 5-7 arriving? Okay, that's something for you to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I had a perfect authentic cadence in measure 10.
Oh, okay. This is someone else's, and this perfect authentic cadence arriving at 10. Yeah, boy, what's Chopin doing? Because if we take this as a perfect authentic cadence, then we have this 5-7 for 2 measures, and then we return to the beginning of the theme. Measure 5 comes back at 13. Okay. And this has to do with, and I thoroughly understand that it's very easy to hear this as a perfect authentic cadence. How long are phrases usually?
8 measures.
8 measures, or some multiple of 4. If we're saying we're hearing this as a perfect authentic cadence, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then what are these What's this 5/7?
That's why I thought the half cadence and came at the end, because that would be technically measure 8.
That would be measure 8. Okay, so what leads us to think this is a perfect authentic cadence? Well, it sure looks like one. It sure looks like one. But then what else is happening that would make us think, oh, that's not a perfect authentic cadence? And this gets into the whole idea of the harmonic sequence. And a harmonic sequence that is not prolonging the tonic.
Because the sequence of down fifth, up a fourth, down fifth, up a fourth, right before that.
Yes. Yes.
Is it, maybe
That's
that
part of
has
it. That's part of it. Let me get a blank copy of. I have them sent out already.
I have a partially blank one.
Sorry, y'all. I thought I had sent it out. Did I put it over there? Are any of these my papers? Those are my papers. Ah, is that it? Yes, here they are. Okay. So, well, we can also look at this one. Okay, so one, when the E flat moves to F, technically you can call it a 6/6, exactly. And if you have a 6 in first inversion, it is most typically right after a root position 1 chord. And then B flat, A flat, D flat. Is that a D flat on the score? Okay, so B flat, D flat, A flat. That's not going to be the 5 of. It's just a 2.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's D flat. So that's a diatonic 2/7. Going out to E flat. That's just our standard 5 chord, root position. And then A flat, G flat, C, it's functioning as the 5/7 to 4, D flat, F, and A flat, or D flat. I didn't include the A flat there. Then a G7, which is 5/7 to 3, and it responds normally, resolves normally. 5/7 of 2 going out to 2, and then 5/7. Our original 5/7 going out to 1, and then return to 2 measures of 5/7. So there's a couple of different ways to think of this sequence. One is when 2. Do you have an eraser?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, super. If you look straight at root movement, yes. 6 to 2 to 5. I'm going to annotate some things on your score. The root of this chord is 6. The root of this chord is 2. The root of this chord is 5. The root of the downbeat of 7 is scale degree 1, going to scale degree 4, going to scale degree. The root of the G chord is 7. The root of the 3 chord is 3. The root of the 5 of 2 is 6. The root of this 2 chord is 2. The root of the 5/7 is 5, and then to 1. So if you're just looking at roots of adjacent chords, what are they doing? 6, 2, 5, 1, 4, 7, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1.
Down by 5th.
It's down by 5th. And then once we start using every other chord as a secondary dominant, so if we're just looking at, for example, the root of the 5 chord, that's not a secondary dominant. It's not approached by a secondary dominant. 4 is approached by a secondary dominant. 3 is approached by a secondary dominant. 2 is approached by a secondary dominant. And then we get 1 approached by its own dominant. If we're just looking at the chords, what is the root movement through this section?
Down by a step.
Down by step. So then it's finding, oh, there's a sequence. Yes, you can. This is when I said there's a couple different ways to look at this sequence. But once you have secondary dominants resolving, look at the chords to which they're resolving. And then you get a sequence down by step, which is why at measure 10, you arrive on a 1 chord. That's more than it is a perfect authentic cadence, it's part of the sequence. That's just where the sequence arrives. Yeah. Does that help inform how you're going to, what decisions you're going to make when analyzing this passage? Does that help you decide, what's being prolonged?
Mm-hmm. But the only question I have is,
Mm-hmm.
since in the book, it always starts on a 1 and ends on a 1,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
and so we've never seen
Okay.
it beginning on a 5.
Yes. Okay, so where does this sequence actually start then? What are you thinking gets prolonged in this sequence?
It's prolonging dominant,
Yeah. Yeah. Where does it start then?
so it would start at the beginning, because
Okay.
if this was
but
all 5.
This was 5, and then this is 5/7. Yes, but this is a real tonic chord.
So
Okay. Here's a 1, and some people would say yes, this is 6/6. Some people would say that this is above the A flat. This is E flat F. This is just 5/6 linear motion. You can analyze it either way. It's fine. And then we get a 2/7. This is a diatonic 2/7, and that's followed by what?
So would it start at the 5/7 of 4 is where the sequence would begin?
Yeah. So
So
you're going to
that's
put your
actually-
parentheses at the beginning of measure 7 and at the end of measure 10.
The 1.
And this is all a sequence that prolongs the dominant. Isn't that interesting?
So the sequence is when you're labeling them, it has to be between the same chord.
Generally, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there are exceptions because we're dealing with art,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate to say that,
Yeah.
it's always this way. Yeah.
And so the introduction is just setting you up to know, is it kind of just setting you up for the idea that you're going to be prolonging 5?
Quite. That's a good way of explaining the introduction and explaining the. Some people use the term intro, extro. Yeah.
Okay.
So why would you start on 7 and not 6?
Why would you start in measure 7? Because generally, the first and last harmony in between the sequence
Okay.
is what goes is what's within the parentheses.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's why it sure sounds like a perfect authentic cadence. If you're looking at it, you're going to call that a perfect authentic cadence. But it's within a sequence. You arrive on the 5/1 in measure 10, or 5/7/1 in measure 10, because the previous measures have all been a 5/7/1, 5/7/1. It's the tail end of the sequence. It's very, very deceptive. It's a deceptive perfect authentic cadence. What further questions?
And then there's the second phrase is the repetition of it, but it ends on a PAC.
It ends on a perfect authentic cadence. That is right.
But it's the same sequence
Exactly.
starting at the 5/7 of 4.
Exactly.
Incomplete.
I'm sorry, what is incomplete?
Would that be considered like an incomplete perfect authentic?
Let's see. Let's look at their score. Let me see the score for measure 20. That's a great question. It looks okay. So 14, 15. Oh, not showing the right thing on the screen. Okay, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Well, by bass notes alone, 19, there's our E flat. And if I'm just looking at the bass, E flat, G, D flat, that's my 5/7. 20, A flat, C, A flat, there's, okay, by bass notes alone, it sure looks like a perfect authentic cadence. Now I want to look at the right hand. And in my skeleton version, I gave you at 19 to 20, B flat, A flat. Well, that 19 to 20, that sure looks like a 5/7 to 1. And so, okay, so Dr. Gonzalez, how did you get from your skeleton version, how did you get B flat, A flat out of the melody? Because I see more than just it, B flat, da, 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 da. Okay. this B flat, the A natural is just a chromatic lower neighbor. You come back to the B flat, ba, 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 in register. This B flat is connecting to that A flat. So I would call this a perfect authentic cadence. Ornamented for sure. The ornamentation I did not put on the skeleton because it's the B flat, A flat that is the skeleton, the essential notes. And Chopin and his artistry ornaments it wonderfully, not only with a lower neighbor, but with an arpeggio.
And we should analyze it from this.
Yeah. That's why I gave you the skeleton, because it would be, quite a monumental task to analyze it from the score. Yeah. Good questions. What else do you want to ask about?
So we don't have to write if that's complete or incomplete?
A complete, what is an incomplete cadence versus a complete cadence?
Complete will have all the tonic, predominant, dominant. and
Yes,
tonic.
yes. Considering that the sequence ends right before, this is going to be complete or incomplete?
Incomplete.
Incomplete. And incomplete, ornamented, perfect authentic cadence.
And so from now on, should we always label?
If you're just going to label it on the page, use half cadence, imperfect authentic cadence, or perfect authentic cadence. If I ask you to write about it, then include complete, incomplete, ornamented, non-ornamented. Yeah. Well, ornamented. You don't have to say it's unornamented if it's not ornamented. But if it's ornamented, please say ornamented. Did you know there were so many cadences? And in fact, Bill Kaplan, the author of our textbook, has written a very, very lengthy article on cadences, and that's his most recent scholarly project. And he's finding out that cadences are not as certain as we all thought they were. Yeah. In theory one, we teach you, theory two, whatever. We teach you cadences as this very simple thing. They are not so simple. Okay. Anyone have any questions about 21 through 28, the bridge?
It's just a string of the way I looked at it. It's just a string of the 503 repetition, 5 7 to 5, and 5 7 to 5 7.
Okay, so 21 starts out as 5 7 of 3, and that gets repeated. 21 22 is repeated in 23 24. Harmonic repetition. And then 25 to 26, 5 7 to 5. 27 to 28. What's the chord of arrival in measure 28? It's an E flat 7. So this is correctly labeled. It's 5 7 of 5 7. Some people have written me to ask about, is this a modulation to the dominant? I would say it sure looks like one, but is there a cadence in E flat? No. This is labeled correctly because it's a half cadence in our original key. It's not a cadence in the key of E flat. The moment this is a 5 7, and the E flat chord in measure 28, the moment it is a 5 7, it is no longer a tonic. It's no longer tonic in the key of E flat. It is now the dominant of A flat. If 27 and 28 had replicated measures 25 and 26, 26 is a pure E flat major chord. Then I could say, I can see how, I can understand how you'd call this a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E flat and a modulation. But arrival on 5 7, E flat 7 points us back to A flat. Yes, next question. Would anyone like to talk about this A flat minor chord? Okay. I have rightfully been pointed out as saying, but you said there wasn't modal mixture, and this is an A flat minor chord. Well, I misspoke, or I understated. This is an A flat minor chord. There's a couple of different ways of analyzing it. And so technically this is modal mixture. I was thinking full-blown modal mixture with lots of minor fours and diminished twos and so forth. If you're just looking at the bass notes, C, C flat, B flat, how does C flat function as in between a C and a B flat. C, the root of a 3-chord, B flat, the root of the 5, 7, and 5. C flat is a passing tone. Therefore, I can think of the C flat as being the bass support for a passing harmony. So if you call it a minor 1 first inversion, that's fine. If you're thinking, okay, we're sort of going over to E flat, we're not going to get there fully because we arrive on E flat 7 in measure 28, but in the key of E flat, A flat minor, E flat, F, G, A flat, 4 in first inversion, you can label it as a 4, 6 in terms of E flat, but it's still going to be a passing harmony because C flat is a passing tone between C natural and B flat, so C flat is supporting a passing harmony. Put the Roman numeral there, regardless of how you label it. Put it in parentheses, label it with a P. Other questions that have come to me via email are how to deal with the F and F flats in the section after 45. These really are ninths. Why? Because whether it's F natural going to E flat or F flat going to E flat, the ninths really do resolve down by step, just like sevenths resolve down by step. When the ninth ends up in a sonority, but it doesn't resolve down by step, and off the top of my head, I don't have an example to give to you, but that's often common in Mozart. I think of it as being in Mozart, where you could say, oh, that's a 5-9, but the ninth doesn't resolve down by step. Then it's not really a 5-9. These ninths really do resolve down. The chord E flat, G, B flat, D flat, F, D flat resolves down. D flat's the seventh. Sevenths resolve down by step. D flat, C, but it's also F, A flat, or F flat, A flat. So those really are 5-9 chords. Whether it's a natural 9, just with a 9, or flat 9, in which case label it flat 9. Put a flat in front of the 9 to distinguish the natural 9 versus the flat 9. And let's see. Another question that came up had to do with the arrival in measure 52. Imperfect authentic cadence, yes, because the arrival is on E flat. On the video, it was number 33. In the measure numbers, it's 52. Corresponds to the very opening. Excuse me. And there really is a sense where here's your final arrival on an A flat in the melody. There's a sense in which there's the real closure. But there's also, to get into actual precise detail, there's page 1 of the score. The real perfect authentic cadence at the end of the piece is here at 44. Everything after 45 is, some people call it extra or outro or something like this. What do they call it? It's you can call it little codetta, technically, but the real final cadence is at 45, at 44. Here's your 5-7. Here's your B flat, A flat, E flat, A flat. That's your real structural cadence. Everything that follows, you can call it coda, codetta, closing material, because it's not thematic in the same way that the material from measure 5 to 20 is thematic. And it corresponds to measures 1 through 4.
And then is there technically a sequence with the ending being going back from 1 to 5-9, and the different 5s, the different 5-9s? You
do get lots of repetition of 5-9, 2 types of ninths, 5-9-1, 5-9-1, absolutely. Repetition there. Is that a sequence? Is it repetition or is it a sequence? It's repetition. Yeah, more than it is sequence. And then notice that you get, so you get 45, 46. And then 47, 48 is almost the same, but then the repetition occurs with enters even earlier. then it had in 45 to 46, basically 2 measures, and 47, 48 starts the repetition, and then the next repetition, and the next repetition comes in even earlier, and then instead of just keep repeating, we get the E flat, scale degree 5, the dominant, now sustained in the bass for 2 measures, even though the right hand continues to oscillate back and forth. But at this point, this is all about the dominant in 50 and 51 because the dominant remains in the bass. So there's a sense that 50 is a 5-6-4, and then 51 is your real 5-7, and then arrival on measure on tonic in measure 52. What further questions? Does this answer some of the parts that were ambiguous? Okay, that's the goal. Well, this wraps up our review discussion.